Hey guys, it's Always Improving here, and today I'm going to be painting something I've wanted to make for a long time, and that is a full-blown gouache portrait. Not like a lot of the stuff I've been doing, not those little smaller ones made out of gouache, but a bigger 9x12 piece of artwork that is made entirely from gouache, and it's my favorite thing. It's a portrait. I have done a couple other finalized pieces that were done mostly in gouache, but this is the first portrait that I'm going to do that is made with this Himi gouache completely. So I'm really excited to get started today, and I'm going to be creating a painting of from a reference photo from MorganDrinksCoffee. She is a TikToker, but she's also on Instagram, and that's where I'm pulling these pictures from. I'll put the reference photo on the screen now, and yeah, let's get started. Now that I've done a few sketches and a little bit of color testing, I can bring out this watercolor paper. I know I'm using gouache, but gouache is really just a more pigmented version of watercolor, and watercolor paper is usually the best material to use with gouache, so that's what I'm using. This is 100% cotton fluid 100. I've used it once before, and it's good quality. But with gouache, it's not as important. It just needs to be some thick paper. But yeah, I'm really excited to get started on this, and let's begin. I'm first going to do a sketch on this watercolor paper before I move into painting it with this Himi gouache. Just like I start in my watercolor portraits with this gouache portrait, after sketching I began with the skin tone. I didn't really know for sure how I wanted all the colors to lay out. I had done a little test, so I kind of knew, but I did recognize that in the reference image that I showed earlier, her skin had a nice golden shine to it. The light around her in the sun and the time of the day kind of influenced her skin tone to make it more yellow than usual, and there was sort of golden glow. So I wanted to make sure I captured that. And I did this by just adding more yellow, I think, than I would to a normal skin tone or to a skin tone that's not in such a white. The main thing I focused on, though, in the beginning stages were capturing where the shadows and the highlights were of the face. So you can see in multiple areas I left it white, such as on the nose and right to the right of it. Of course, I left out the main features, her eyes, her lips, things like that, just so that I could get a better color later. I also went in and added that deep shadow on her neck and that, on her cheekbone on the right side. I wanted to add that shadow right away so I didn't have to worry about it later. After putting down the base skin tone, I moved on to facial features, her lips, her nostrils, and her eyelashes. And I really liked how her lips turned out. The teeth didn't look bad at all, and I was really happy with them. But her eyes, her eyelashes, I guess, the right side of her face, I really didn't like. The first ones I did, but the second ones were pretty good, but I knew I'd have to redo those later. So it was okay for my first time with facial features in gouache. After adding a couple of details to the rest of the skin, such as her hand and a little bit of the shadows around her eyes and her neck, I moved on into the base coat of the hair. For this, I just mixed a nice deep brown color and had variation through it with some more of a red and brighter brown, along with some of the darker and more dull brown for the shadows and just for nice texture in her hair. I used some of that darker color to shade her lip area and some other little shadows in her face before moving on to her shirt and just the under turtleneck long sleeve that she had on, and just did a flat coat of black for that. Once I had added a base layer for her eyebrows, I moved on to some smaller details, and then to her straps on her dress. I added some red, some yellow, and some white stripes on them because that's kind of how it looked in the reference photo. And I made her dress a little more gray than the reference photo as well, just to kind of emphasize the contrast between that and her turtleneck. I then worked on the eyes of this image for a little bit, just adding sort of a base coat with some general colors that I thought I would want, before moving on to some of the shadows, the deeper shadows near her eyes, and just emphasizing that dark area near her eyes. And while doing that, I also added the shadows on top of her eyelids as well. Finally, I felt pretty satisfied with most of her face in this portrait. The main area that I really wanted to work on was the nose, and as you can see, I worked on that for a while before finally just leaving it as it was, and I decided that if I really didn't like it later, I could come back to it. I added a quick base coat for the background before moving on into the clouds and the more fine details of the background. I didn't take these elements of the background directly from the reference photo, but I did have some inspiration from them. I used a sort of cyan color for the sky and had a nice brickish colored building on the right hand side. After I finished the background, I was really liking how this piece was looking. I just had a few last minute details that I really wanted to fix up. This included fixing the eyelashes that, especially on that right side, that I really didn't like. I added that eye crease above the eyelash line and then redid those really fast. I also fixed up of the lips a little bit. And emphasize those deeper shadows that I was talking about earlier that were around the eye. The last few details that I did work out were the shadows on her hand and some of the clouds in the background. I added a little bit more softness to them. I also went back over some parts of her turtleneck, her long sleeve turtleneck that she was wearing, just to make it more flat in some areas and to cover up some of the white showing through. But yeah, those were just the final things that I did for this image. Okay guys, with those final details, this piece is finished. I really enjoyed this process. It was my first gouache portrait, and I think it really turned out well. I'm just going to sign this piece so I can outro the video. I really hope you enjoyed watching this process. And if you did, please comment down below what you liked about it or some ideas for future videos. I really love hearing your feedback, and I hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye!